Some men barely try and women still can't let go. No explanations, no emotional speeches, no constant attention. Just a quiet pull she doesn't understand, but can't escape. That alone should make you question everything you've been told about attraction. Because women do not bond with the man who explains her feelings. They don't attach to the nicest guy, the smartest, or the one who listens the most. They attach to the man who shifts their emotional balance without asking permission. That's the part no one talks about. Attachment doesn't begin with affection, it begins with impact. With the subtle moment, a man enters her reality and alters how she feels around him without chasing, without reassurance, without words. And this is where most men fail. They believe attachment comes from doing more effort, more attention, more gestures. But effort destroys mystery, and mystery is what the female nervous system responds to. The men women cling to aren't performing. They aren't impressing. In fact, they often look like they're doing less than everyone else, because real attachment is triggered by small, almost invisible behaviors. Microscopic actions her brain registers as safety, authority, unpredictability, and desire at the same time. When a woman becomes emotionally attached, it's not a choice. She doesn't wake up and decide to bond with a man. Her limbic system recognizes a pattern that says, this man feels different, this man doesn't need me, and that's exactly why I feel pulled toward him. And no, this has nothing to do with compliments, deep talks, or romantic speeches. Those are surface games. What actually creates attachment are 6 silent actions. Behaviors so subtle she won't even notice them happening, yet powerful enough to activate the same neural circuits responsible for desire, bonding, and emotional dependency. That's what we're breaking down today. No theory, no motivation, no romance. Just the cold psychological mechanics behind why some men become unforgettable and others get erased the moment they stop texting. Stay with me. Let's start with the first one. And pay attention here because this is where most men fail without ever realizing it. Break her predictability without breaking her security. A woman becomes attached when a man gives her 2 things at the same time, certainty and mystery. Miss either one and the spell breaks. Too predictable and her emotions go numb. You become background noise, safe, familiar, replaceable. Too chaotic and her defenses switch on. She stops feeling drawn and starts feeling alert. But in the narrow space between those 2 extremes, something dangerous happens. That's where deep mental attraction is born. Most men fall into one of 2 traps. Either they turn themselves into an open book routine, transparent, emotionally available on demand, or they try so hard to be unpredictable that they come off unstable, inconsistent, and needy in disguise. The man who creates attachment understands a rule most men never even question. A woman's attention is not conquered, it's interrupted. And no, interruption does not mean chaos. It means disruption with control. You subtly break her emotional rhythm just enough that her mind starts leaning toward you. Not because you confuse her, but because you don't operate on her logic, you move according to your own. You don't reply to please her. You reply because it makes sense to you. You don't speak to gain approval. You speak because you're clear. And that difference, that quiet self-reference, shatters the illusion of control she thought she had. Because whether she admits it or not, every woman wants to understand the man she desires. The moment she can't fully read you, something flips. Her mind starts working, replaying your tone, analyzing your pauses, interpreting your silences, wondering what you really think and why it matters to her. That loop releases dopamine, the same chemical tied to obsession and addiction. She doesn't feel attracted in the romantic sense. She feels hooked. And that tension, that unresolved pull, becomes the foundation of attachment. But here's the paradox most men get wrong. You must disrupt her emotions without ever breaking her sense of safety. That's the fine line between power and chaos. She has to feel that you're solid, that you move from conviction, not confusion, that your unpredictability comes from sovereignty, not from emotional instability. Your energy should communicate one message clearly. I'm grounded in my world. I don't need your validation, but I'm never fully predictable. That tension keeps her connected. Not because she desires your body, but because her mind wants closure, and you've denied it. When your behavior is consistent in values, but unpredictable in expression, you become something her brain can't categorize, and the female mind craves what it cannot label. She's drawn to the man who represents both stability and suspense, a paradox her biology cannot resolve. Because predictability creates safety, but unpredictability creates emotion, and emotion is what her psyche ultimately obeys. So, understand this. You're not playing games, you're creating gravity. You're not withholding affection, you're controlling rhythm. You're not being distant, you're being sovereign. She keeps coming back, not because you're always there, but because your absence feels like a question her mind needs to answer. And when your presence both grounds her and unsettles her, you're no longer part of her routine. You become part of her inner landscape. That's where real attachment begins. Not from the man who chases, but from the man whose silence keeps speaking inside her thoughts. Now that you understand the first principle, breaking her predictability without breaking her security, get ready for the second. Because the next one doesn't just reach her mind, it enters her body. And once you understand that level of connection, there's no going back. 2. Create sensory experiences her mind can't erase. Understand this clearly. Attachment doesn't come from what you say, it comes from what her body feels in your presence without you explaining a single thing. Words decay, gifts lose novelty. Even touch, over time, becomes familiar. But the body doesn't forget sensations. The female body doesn't store logic, it stores states. It remembers how her nervous system reacted when you were there. The tone of your voice, low, calm, unhurried. The way your movements never rush, never apologize, never seek permission. Every action deliberate, grounded, controlled. It remembers your silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of restraint. When you look at her and hold eye contact without tension, without urgency, something ancient activates inside her nervous system. This man is safe, but he is not passive. And that contradiction is where memory is burned in. The female body records emotional memory through sensation, not speech. Not through what is said, but through what is felt. Every time you maintain that composed rhythm, you are quietly conditioning her physiological response to you. Most men sabotage this. They talk too much. They move too fast. They fill every gap with noise. They chase validation with volume. But the man who creates attachment understands something most never will. He doesn't seduce. He orchestrates atmosphere. He knows emotion is spatial, not verbal. That attraction doesn't live in conversation. It lives in the energy between words. He enters a room and the air shifts. Not because he's trying to dominate, but because his presence is anchored, heavy, settled. His calm slows the environment down. His stillness feels like power under control. And when he speaks, he doesn't rush to fill space. He lets silence come before his words and after them. That silence amplifies weight. Without realizing it, her body responds. Her breathing slows, then deepens. Her thoughts narrow into focus. Her nervous system enters a state of alert fascination. Not comfort, contrast, safety mixed with anticipation. That combination creates gravity. Her subconscious begins recording the pattern, your tone, your rhythm, your stillness. And every time you reappear, her body reactivates the same emotional signals automatically. That's where the unconscious anchor forms. She feels more when you are near. She feels less when you are gone. That contrast becomes emotional withdrawal. Withdrawal becomes need, and need is the root of attachment. Understand this. You are not trying to please her. You are training her nervous system to recognize your presence as intensity. You are not offering comfort. You are offering contrast. When you leave, the world feels quieter. When you return, it feels charged. That rise and fall becomes her internal proof that you matter. A man who understands this doesn't chase emotions. He engineers them because the human mind doesn't fall in love with people. It falls in love with states, and he becomes the state she can't recreate on her own. When your presence triggers depth, calm, and tension at the same time, you stop being a man in her life. You become the experience her body keeps searching for. And once a woman's body remembers you, her mind will invent every reason to follow. Now that you understand how attachment is built through sensation, prepare for the next step because the third action isn't about presence, it's about absence, and what happens when your silence becomes the loudest sound in her mind. 3. Master the art of intermittence. Nothing creates deeper attachment than intermittence. Not constant attention, not total absence, but the controlled rhythm of appearing and retreating. This is where most men lose control without even noticing. In behavioral psychology, this principle is called variable reinforcement. It's the same mechanism that hooks people on social media, on gambling, on the chase itself. You never know when the reward will come, but when it does, it's just enough to keep you waiting for the next one. Women experience this exact same neurological loop, just not through machines, through emotional signals. When a man is always available, her brain adapts. Dopamine drops, desire flattens. When a man disappears completely, her mind erases him as a viable emotional risk. But when his presence is unpredictable and intense, something different happens. Her limbic system lights up. Curiosity awakens. Anticipation floods her nervous system. Understand this clearly. Intermittence is not about vanishing. It's not about manipulation. It's about breaking emotional routine. Most men become predictable far too quickly. Their attention follows patterns. Their messages arrive on schedule. Their tone seeks comfort instead of tension. They confuse consistency with value without realizing that predictability kills emotional voltage. The man who understands this law builds his presence like a heartbeat, steady enough to be felt, rare enough to be missed. His responses aren't mechanical, they're organic, aligned with his time, his priorities, his real desire. His energy follows the pulse of his life, not the tempo of her expectations. And that's what makes his presence feel rare. The natural intermittence of a man centered on himself, not cold, not careless, but devoted to his path, is deeply addictive. She never knows when you'll reappear, but when you do, her body reacts. That surge after distance reinforces the bond, just like craving, followed by reward. Her brain begins to associate your name, your voice, even your silence, with dopamine. Absence, then intensity. Once her nervous system learns that rhythm, you stop being an option. You become a stimulus. She starts anticipating you the way the brain anticipates a game it can't stop playing. The next message, the next look, the next moment of connection. And every time you appear, dopamine spikes. Small, sharp, powerful. This is why intermittent presence is stronger than constant attention. Constancy creates comfort. Intermittence creates addiction. But pay attention to this part because this is where amateurs fail. This only works when it's authentic, it cannot be timed, it cannot be calculated, it cannot be acted. It has to emerge naturally from a man who is busy living, a man who doesn't plan his silence. His silence is a byproduct of focus, and she can feel that. She knows the difference between manipulation and momentum. Manipulation drains trust. Momentum ignites curiosity. A man anchored in his mission doesn't need to disappear to feel mysterious. His life already makes him unpredictable. His purpose creates scarcity. And scarcity is what gives his attention weight. When you master this, she never knows when the next moment will come. Only that when it does, it will matter. Your unpredictability becomes her rhythm. Your silence becomes her suspense. Your return becomes her reward. That's how man stops being an option and becomes a biological trigger, something her body waits for even when her mind tells her not to. Now you understand controlled presence. But the next action goes deeper because what truly binds a woman isn't mystery. It isn't timing. It's how safe she feels when her inner world is exposed. And the next action reveals exactly how to unlock that without ever losing your center. Quick pause. If you're still with me, comment, "I stay centered." If you've ever noticed women react more when you stop chasing and start holding your ground, I want to see who actually understands this. 4. Make her express herself without ever feeling judged. One of the most powerful experiences a man can give a woman has nothing to do with romance. It's emotional permission. Not through phrases like, "I understand you," not through reassurance, not through advice, but through presence. The man who creates real attachment doesn't rush to fix her. He doesn't interrupt. He doesn't argue. He doesn't soothe too early just to make the discomfort stop. He listens, not passively, but steadily, with an attention so grounded, so unmoved that her emotional armor starts loosening on its own. His gaze doesn't seek approval. It doesn't correct. It doesn't flinch. It simply holds. And that level of calm attention dismantles defenses she didn't even know were active. Because most women, especially the strong ones, live in constant self-protection. They've learned that vulnerability has a cost, that opening up often leads to judgment, to distance, to being misunderstood or emotionally punished. So when she encounters a man who doesn't analyze her emotions, doesn't label them, doesn't try to manage them, but observes her calmly without losing himself, something deep shifts. Her nervous system registers one thing: with him, I am safe. Her mind records another: with him, I feel without consequence. And that silent registration, that brief invisible moment, is where attachment is born. You need to understand this clearly. In the female psyche, emotional safety equals value. She doesn't bond with the man who solves her problems. She bonds with the man who can sit inside her emotional chaos without being dragged into it. That's the real power of presence. Not the presence that fills space, but the presence that allows space. When you don't flinch at her emotions, when you remain grounded as she exposes what she hides from everyone else, you become something rare. You become her emotional mirror. The one place where she sees herself fully and doesn't feel rejected, and that experience is unforgettable. Long after you're gone, she will replay that moment. The feeling of being heard without interruption, seen without judgment, understood without explanation. Her subconscious marks you as a reference point, not a role, not a label, a state. The state where she could finally think, even silently, I can be myself without feeling weak. She will never say that out loud, but the thought binds her more tightly than desire ever could. Because desire fades once it's satisfied. But emotional freedom, that becomes dependency. She may try to pull away. She may tell herself she doesn't need you. But part of her will keep orbiting back to the one man who made her feel safe enough to be real. Every man tries to be exciting. Very few learn how to be safe. And safety in the female psyche is the deepest form of seduction there is. You don't earn it with charm. You don't beg for it with empathy. You command it through calm, through emotional control, through the ability to stay unshaken while she unravels. That's why she bonds with the man who listens differently, not to respond, but to witness. Because being witnessed without judgment is the rarest form of intimacy she will ever experience. And once she associates that feeling with you, she won't crave constant attention. She'll crave your presence, the stillness that makes her feel seen, not the noise that makes her feel noticed. When you reach that point, you stop competing for her mind. You live inside it. And now that you understand how silence and safety bind her emotions, prepare for the next action. Because what comes next goes even deeper. The fifth action will show you how to express interest without dependency, so your presence becomes a reward, not a request. 5. Show interest without dependence. This is where most men sabotage everything. They confuse interest with need. Interest creates attraction. Dependence suffocates it. A woman does not attach to the man who worships her. She attaches to the man who sees her clearly and still doesn't need her. She feels it instantly before words, before logic. Your energy says one thing, my life is already whole. I choose you. I don't rely on you. That distinction changes everything. Because now your attention stops feeling like pursuit and starts feeling like privilege, something deliberate, something earned, something scarce. And scarcity is what gives attention weight. Most men do the opposite. They chase, they overtext, they rearrange their entire lives to stay available. They confuse constant presence with connection, without realizing that availability without boundaries signals emotional poverty. But the man who creates attachment understands the inverse truth. He doesn't chase, he selects. He doesn't react to every signal. He decides which ones deserve his energy. That restraint communicates a silent message. I could, but I don't need to. And that quiet control is intoxicating. Because when she senses that you could have anyone but remain present by choice, not dependent, her internal system destabilizes. Her logic says, he's independent, but her emotions whisper, then why me? That contradiction becomes obsession. Her mind starts circling you, replaying interactions, analyzing tone, searching for meaning. What makes her different? Why does his attention feel rare? That analysis releases dopamine, the chemistry of curiosity and desire. And just like that, your presence becomes a mystery. Her nervous system wants to solve. You're no longer feeding her ego, you're feeding her wonder. Understand this clearly. When your life is full, when your mission is alive, when your energy is disciplined, you stop looking to her for emotional nourishment. You become nourishment. Because women don't crave attention, they crave the validation of being chosen by a man who doesn't need to choose anyone. You don't need to prove your worth. Your composure already does that. You don't need to make her feel special. She will feel special simply by being in the orbit of a man who doesn't revolve around her gravity. That combination, desire without dependence, warmth without attachment, choice without need, triggers her deepest bonding instinct. Because biologically, a woman does not want to mother you. She wants to admire you. And admiration only exists where self-sufficiency lives. When she sees that your peace remains intact even when she pulls away, that your focus doesn't collapse when her attention fades, that your validation comes from purpose, not approval, you stop being a man who wants her. You become a man her mind cannot release. Your restraint becomes the new standard. Your calm becomes the new craving. And when you finally give attention, it feels like a reward, not a routine. Here's the paradox most men never grasp. When you no longer need her affection, she starts competing for it. When you stop chasing her validation, she begins seeking yours. Because in her subconscious, value is measured by what you can walk away from. So yes, show interest, be warm, be human, be real, but never be dependent. Never let your presence lose its rarity. The moment your attention becomes predictable, your power evaporates. A man who needs nothing commands everything. Not control over her, control over himself. And now you can see the full architecture of attachment. Mystery, sensation, freedom, restraint. But there's one final layer, because the strongest bond isn't formed while you're present. It's what happens after you leave. And the final action reveals exactly how to leave a psychological imprint that keeps working even in your absence. That's where this truly becomes irreversible. 6. Leave a trace in her mind when you are gone. This is the final principle, and it's the most subtle of all, not because it's weak, but because it works after you've done nothing at all. Your real power doesn't begin when you're present. It begins when your absence becomes louder than anyone else's presence. When you're gone, living your life focused, unavailable, still, and yet she feels you. This isn't manipulation, it's psychological resonance. It's the echo you leave inside her nervous system. You don't create it with grand gestures or dramatic moments. You create it through details so precise, so personal, that her mind can't replace them. The way you look at her, not with hunger, but with depth. The pause before your touch, measured, intentional. The way you say her name, not soft, not needy, but grounded. Those details become micro-emotional codes. They bypass memory. They engrave themselves directly into the subconscious. And then she returns to her life. The noise, the crowd, the endless stimulation, and something simple triggers it. A scent, a tone, a silence. Her body reacts before her mind understands why. For a split second, you're there again. Your voice, your presence, that exact internal sensation. That's how attachment seals itself, not through presence, but through involuntary recall. Understand this clearly. Her body remembers emotion more faithfully than her mind ever could. When she experiences intensity and safety with you at the same time, her nervous system fuses those opposites together and attaches your name to the feeling. You stop being a man, you become a pattern, a stimulus, a chemical signature she cannot recreate anywhere else. That's why she comes back, not out of loyalty, not out of logic, but because her biology betrays her reasoning. Attachment doesn't form through force or overt dominance. It forms when a woman feels something she cannot fully explain, but cannot stop wanting to feel again. Calm mixed with danger, stability mixed with mystery, familiarity mixed with disruption. Only a man who has mastered his own center can create that, because you cannot leave peace in her if you live in inner chaos. You cannot awaken curiosity if you're copying other men. You cannot become unforgettable if you keep chasing to be remembered. Real influence is silent. It doesn't demand attention. It creates it. That's why the most Machiavellian form of power is not control over her behavior, but influence over her nervous system. You alter her without owning her. You provoke without pleading. You dominate without touching. You stop being a person. You become an experience. And once that happens, you don't insist. She returns on her own. She scrolls through names, sees faces, hears voices. Nothing hits the same frequency because you became the emotional pattern her mind cannot replace. That is the true essence of attachment. To alter without possession. To seduce without noise. To dominate without force. Very few men ever reach this level because it requires discipline, stillness, and absolute control over oneself. But once you do, you realize the truth most men never see. The game was never about being perfect or charming or impressive. It was about being unforgettable. And now you understand the 6 invisible actions that bind a woman, not through promises, but through psychological gravity. Now you understand the law. What she cannot predict, she cannot control. What she cannot explain, she cannot forget. And what she cannot replace, she will chase. Break her predictability and curiosity awakens. Awaken her senses and she feels you even in silence. Master intermittence and her mind begins to orbit, searching for rhythm in your absence. Offer emotional safety and her soul learns to rest only in your stillness. Show interest without dependence and your restraint lingers like desire disguised as discipline. Leave a trace when you're gone and your ghost will live longer in her nervous system than most men ever live in her life. Because the truth Machiavelli understood was simple. Power is not what you take, it's what others give you voluntarily when they can no longer separate your presence from their own need. That is the essence of the Machiavellian man. He doesn't beg to be desired, he becomes the stimulus desire obeys. He doesn't chase emotions, he engineers them. He doesn't conquer women, he conquers the reactions they can't control. And once you've seen the architecture behind attachment, you can't unsee it. Every pause, every delay, every silence, you'll recognize it for what it really is. A test of center. She doesn't want your chaos. She wants to feel her chaos reflected in your calm. She wants to lose herself, but only inside a man who never loses himself first. That's why Machiavelli said the wise man adapts to the times, but the master creates the times. You are no longer reacting to attraction, you are designing it. You are no longer seeking validation, you are redefining value. And as you step into this state, a man whose presence alters, whose silence seduces, whose absence burns. Remember this, the weak man seeks attention, the strong man commands it, but the awakened man becomes it. When you reach that level, you stop chasing love, approval, or validation. You become the gravity they orbit. So stay centered, stay dangerous, and above all, stay unforgettable. Because this is not the end of the game, this is the game, and now you know how to play it. If this opened your eyes, then you're not the same man who pressed play. You've seen a truth most will never dare to face. Power and attraction does not belong to the loud, it belongs to the silent, to the man whose presence rewires the air around him, to the calm that unsettles, to the confidence that doesn't need to explain itself. You've stopped being predictable, you've stopped being ordinary, you've become gravitational because attraction isn't built with words, it's carved in silence, written in restraint. It's born the moment you stop reaching outward and start radiating inward. So listen, from this moment on, you don't chase, you command through absence, you seduce through stillness, you lead through mastery of yourself. This isn't a trick, it's transformation. The man who understands these 6 actions doesn't play the game, he becomes the board itself. And if this message spoke to the part of you that refuses to stay average, if you felt something shift inside you, then you already know what to do. Subscribe, because this is where the facade ends and power begins. Welcome to the channel. Your evolution has just begun.